Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Chris Before Coffee. Today we're going to be discussing the bandwagon effect. I want to talk about the IPO culture that the world is seeming to slip into, the end of endings. Now there are only beginnings, where we keep moving from one hype cycle to the next. The name of the game seems to be buy now, sell later, and we all become a slave to the trends. Now, I want to today focus on the Ethereum crowd sale and the particular phenomena as it sort of parodies and mimics a lot of this sort of crowdfunding, or as Ethereum are calling it, an actual pre-sale of a product. So they're deliberately going out of their way to make sure that we understand that this is a pre-sale of Ether, much like you get on something like Kickstarter right here. So let's first of all look at what Ethereum is. This is the white paper, which is available on the Ethereum GitHub repository. And the founder, Vitalik, wrote this white paper back in November, and he defined Ethereum as a Turing-complete state transition system, much like Bitcoin's technology, except instead of just dealing with financial transactions, it would deal with commitments made between people. So this is basically just a fancy way of saying we have the ability to record the state of the world in one particular way and then describe its transition into the next state. And the reason, I love the way this guy communicates, by the way, and I wish people would stop telling him to dumb down. He should talk like this more. So this guy actually communicates in code. And he doesn't just do this in white papers on the internet. He actually does this when you speak to him, when you see him give presentations live. He describes essentially what the main business activity of a bank like JP Morgan is, which is you're just moving numbers around on a balance sheet, a database. The difference between a blockchain and a bank is that a bank keeps the ledger to themselves, whereas with a blockchain, the items that are moved across the balance sheet are publicly known, are trivial to verify, but very, very expensive to make, because you have hundreds of millions of dollars worth of energy and computation that goes into making them. So the way it disincentivizes bad actors is by incentivizing honesty more than fraud. There's an incentive structure here. And one of the things that I really liked when I first started reading this white paper back in November, it's changed quite a bit actually since then, he's made several revisions to it, was this idea of the decentralized autonomous organization. And we've talked about that on the World Crypto Network before. What this allows us to do is form organizations and actually bake in, by design, incentive structures so that all of the members of staff behave in an honest way, by already pre-agreeing up front how you would like to behave. It's similar and a little bit akin to setting 2 alarms in the morning because you know you're not going to get up on the first one, right? So it's about being honest with yourself about the way human nature actually is, rather than trying to engineer society based on how you would rather it was, or based on some kind of ideal notion. And today I am joined by my guest. First of all, I'd like to introduce Ksenia. You're coming from Sweden, but you are from Moscow.
Yeah, I'm in Sweden right now.
And what made you want to get involved? You reached out to me on Twitter the other day when I said, like, I'm looking for guests. So what are you interested in with Ethereum?
Basically, I watched your podcast on the 23rd about distributed autonomous corporations, organizations, and I'm kind of interested in how can you prototype those before this technology is actually working. And yeah, so the concept existed before, so I was following bits and pieces of Ethereum and similar projects, so that's the reason.
Very, very good. And of course, I'm joined by Nick, aka PyRebel, who's a long-time guest on the show.
Hey, Chris, how's it going?
Very well, very well. Thanks
I'm
for joining
excited
us.
about today's show. I'm excited to learn about Ethereum today. Hopefully we can answer some questions.
Hopefully we can get some things worked out. And of course, everyone remember that you're the most important guest on this show. In the bottom left-hand corner, you do have a Q&A button. So get ready with your questions, or if you're a fan of Ethereum and you don't like what I'm saying, please lay into me and troll me. And then we also have Paige Peterson from MadeSafe.
Hi.
Hello.
Good to be here. I've been kind of a fan of Ethereum for since its inception. And general fan, though I guess my stance on the crowd sales, that I'm a little confused as to why they did it that way, and I'm definitely interested in talking about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and is there anything to declare in terms of your involvement with MadeSafe? Do you see Ethereum in any way competing with the ideas that you guys are working on?
Not at all. I think the protocols do completely different things. They might have some overlap in some areas, but in terms of, blockchain technology versus MaidSafe technology, they're completely different. We did a crowd sale similar to what they're doing, so maybe we could talk about that too, and the experience that, or knowledge that we gained from doing that. Kind of the first one, actually. So.
That'd be really good to get your insights on it. And lastly, but certainly not least, it is Rob Myers, who we had on the show some time ago. Say hi, Rob.
Hello.
And so actually, since we're with you, let's just start with you, Rob, because before we go into the handling of the crowd sale, I want to focus on what's most important first, which is the actual underlying ideas and the code and the way that is translated. You've quoted Lawrence Lessig in the past, this idea that code is the new law. And of course, we know that law comes with a little bit more nuance, but would you do us the honors of actually showing us some of the things that you've been working on in Ethereum so that we can see a rubber hits the road kind of example?
Okay. Right. This is the Alisie Ethereum client. So this is the bit of software that you run on your computer to talk to the Ethereum network, actually interact with contracts. What you can see on the screen is a proof of concept user interface. So this isn't what the Ethereum team are saying the ultimate product will look like. This is something that they've produced to show that the system works and to allow people who are interested in getting to grips with the system before it goes live, they're saying Q4 of this year, people can get to grips with it, try things out, see how it works. Over on the right of the interface here, there's various technical details. It's a bit crowded because I've only got a very small laptop screen, but there's things like the connections to the network, any pending transactions, and the name registry system that they're using to keep track of contracts. On the left, there's a web view. Now, this is showing a normal HTML page with some JavaScript embedded with just a few special features to allow it to talk to the Alisie client. As a result, the information that you can see here is being pulled from the Ethereum testnet blockchain. Now, this contract is one that I've written. It's a re-implementation of a system called Monograph, which was written to use the Namecoin system to allow people to register notional ownership of digital artworks such as animated GIFs. So here you can see it's pulling information out of the blockchain, displaying it. I've implemented it as a small art market, so you can not only register artworks, you can click sell and it will ignore you because you're doing a live demo. You can then buy them, and all of these transactions are registered on the blockchain, and it's a demonstration of a more detailed, a sort of slightly richer set of interactions than simple transfer of cash from one person to another, as you would see on Bitcoin. And the code.
So we're not just storing economic claims. On the Bitcoin blockchain, we store economic claims where I claim that I can give person B this money, and I'm able to do that only if I can prove the existing state of the blockchain says that I own it. So everyone has to respect everyone's balances when they join the Bitcoin network at the same time. But what you're saying is that you can store more information than just economic claims. You can actually store ownership. It's about property rights. Is that right?
Yes, I mean you can store any information that you can store in a computer's memory. I mean, each Ethereum contract is a small piece of code with an associated memory space or data space. So, I mean, think of it in terms of cookies in a web browser or a database accompanying a program. And you can store pretty much arbitrary information. It won't be the cheapest way of storing, for example, an MP3. If you wanted to store larger amounts of information, the current idea is that you would use a torrent or a distributed hash table to store, for example, the movie or the album or the program or whatever other piece of data you want to store that's sort of impractical to store on the Ethereum blockchain, and you then stuff a reference to that into the blockchain, which the contract, which is basically a small script or program, can access and sort of serve to the user or provide the information about to the user.
Now, can I just interrupt there? So you're talking about distributed hash table, and we should probably just say what that is. So you're talking about a list of cryptographic hashes. Is it a SHA-1 or a 256?
Oh goodness, it's yeah. I mean, it's just a way of generating an unfeasibly large number, which is less likely to refer to two objects than the Earth is to be hit by an asteroid tomorrow.
It's a unique, yes, that's right. It's a unique set of alphanumeric numbers that describe this file or this object in its current state. Now, Project Xanadu by Zed Nelson came up with this in the 1960s, where I don't think he came up with the idea of the URI, the Universal Resource Indicator, but in the top of every browser there is a URL, a Universal Resource Locator. But the broader nebula term for that is a URI, which is something like a lookup table. So a distributed hash table is a kind of a lookup, like an address book of files. But in this case, unlike a URL, which is like, you know, bbc.co.uk or youtube.com, which then has to revert to an IP address, which then has to go through a centralized DNS server, which can be attacked and taken down by governments. What you're talking about is a lookup table that is distributed on a blockchain, which means every full node on the network that downloads the whole blockchain has a copy of this address book. And this number doesn't just point to something, it describes that object, that MP3 file, in a way that can't be falsified. Have I got that right?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a vast. I mean, it's like a telephone directory. When people had print telephone directories, you'd have a book in every house which told you every phone number. So, you know, to prevent society as a whole knowing someone's phone number, you'd have to destroy every single phone book. I mean, that would be quite the operation.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, a distributed hash table is a robust peer-to-peer, I guess, distributed way of storing references to data on the network, and it's a sort of nice complement to Ethereum. I mean, Ethereum is designed to store well-defined contract-like code and the information that it needs to operate. A distributed hash table is designed to robustly store and refer to digital objects. That, you know, each can be used to play to their strengths. The text on the screen, which I'd imagine very few people can actually interpret,
I've made it
is
full
the
screen,
actual.
so we should...
Oh, thank you. Is the actual Ethereum contract that we just saw running. It's written in one of the 3 programming languages that the Ethereum project has currently produced. This is the low-level language, or LLL, and for computer science students, it's a Lisp, which is a kind of language that's very fond of brackets. It's not a programming language that many people would be expected to read or actually use. The advantage of it is, if you understand its syntax, it's quite expressive to write, but more importantly, it's very easy for a computer to parse. So this was the first programming language for Ethereum that the project really sort of got going so people could actually use it. And this compiles down into a low-level byte-coded language like Java or the old ZX Spectrum bytecode, for those of you who are old enough to know about that. And that's what's then actually run on the Ethereum virtual machine. There's 2 other programming languages. There's a nice, There's a nice Python-like programming language called Serpent. Python is a much more human-readable language. This is a very, very, very simple contract which just stores 1 bit of information in the data store for the contract and will then toggle it between 2 states if it receives a message in a transaction. And there's another programming language called Mutan, which is sort of more high-level functional programming language, but I haven't really looked at that. And I mean, this is a theme with the Ethereum project. There's 3 different programming languages. There's about 4 different implementations of the Ethereum virtual machine. One of them in the C++ programming language, one in Python, one in the Go programming language, and another someone's contributed in the Java programming language. And this duplication of effort serves to make sure, firstly, that the whole system isn't going to sort of be specific to a particular environment, so there's no unintended dependencies on the way a particular operating system or a particular programming language or a particular way of connecting to the network works. And it's also a way of making sure that when the system goes live, pretty much whatever kind of programming or whatever kind of environment people wish to use, there should be something to support it. So whilst on the one hand, you know, why are they wasting their time doing 4 different versions of something? The answer is it's not a waste of time. It's making sure that the system really does work, that it's robust, and that it's usable.
You want to eliminate the possibility that it's the coding language that you're using that's causing the error, and not a more general.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how much. I've just introduced the GitHub, mostly because what I want to talk about now is the way that the engineering team has interfaced with the communications team at Ethereum. I've said before that my thesis at the moment is that the best organizations are going to be the ones where the engineers and the communications departments have a mutual respect for one another's professions and are able to work together. In some ways, it's an asymmetric relationship because everyone can communicate. In fact, even if you don't communicate, you're still communicating something. And as a result, it's incumbent on everyone, and everyone is kind of behooved to think carefully before they speak, because the responsibility of the understanding of what I'm saying is on me. If you don't understand what I'm saying right now, it's because I need to change what I'm saying, not because you're too stupid or you just need to learn how to code or grow up or what other things that I've heard come from the Bitcoin community, you know, a la, you know, kind of key management and that kind of thing. And so just quickly, Rob, how much work would you say has gone in as a programmer yourself to creating these languages? I mean, is it hard to create a language, a programming language?
I mean, to create a good programming language is very hard. I mean, there are tools out there for creating the individual technical bits and pieces of a programming language. And there are sort of good environments for actually implementing programming languages in. So there are good tools to make tools in software development. It's much more complex than that with Ethereum, which is a programming language, an environment to run that programming language in, the blockchain technology, the sort of network side of things, and then on top of that, the sort of the user interface to actually implement the contracts that they've implemented. So I mean, there's sort of, you know, I mean, there's clearly an awful lot of work has gone into producing each of these. I mean, it looks like each piece of the system has very strong ownership with someone within the Ethereum project.
Right. So this is, in other words, this isn't just a fork. This isn't just a fork. No, it's not as if the developers have just gone in and copy-pasted.
It's not any kind of fork of Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin itself does contain a small Forth-like programming language, which is similar to the virtual machine that Ethereum uses. I mean, whenever you make a Bitcoin transaction, you are asking the Bitcoin network to run a small program which sort of says, take a value from this location on the blockchain and move it to this location on the blockchain. So anyone who's worried about the question of whether a blockchain-based system that runs code to implement its transactions not can actually work, there's one out there at the moment. It's called Bitcoin. But Ethereum hasn't sort of taken the code, fiddled with it, and sort of done its own thing. It's very much its own implementation of the blockchain and virtual machine principle. And I mean, as I say, that there's very strong ownership of the code within the Ethereum project. I mean, you know who's working on each part of it, and you can file bugs to them, and they'll sort of either say, yep, we accept a patch to that, or sort of fix it quickly, or explain why you've misunderstood the white paper. So from a technical point of view, in terms of being a software developer, dealing with the team developing it, the communication's very transparent, and sort of it's clear what's going on technically. In terms of sort of important questions like exactly how the fee structure will work, because one of the interesting things about Ethereum is it's an agoric programming environment, so your contracts are paying to be run.
Right. Okay, let's go into the... We will have some questions about the fees later, but I understand that's a whole rat's nest in itself. Does anyone have any questions for Rob so far? Have we understood everything? Yeah? Okay, so let's
I had a question.
Go for it.
How would the contracts interact? Like, do I need to use the Ethereum application in order to interact with these contracts, or could I interact with these contracts outside of Ethereum through like APIs or some crap?
Yeah, I mean, at present, the available ways of interacting with the Ethereum testnet that's running is through the clients that the Ethereum team have provided, or through a proxy implemented in something like Node. So in much the same way as you can interact with the Bitcoin blockchain through a web-based wallet or an app on your smartphone, the Ethereum network is something that you can talk to from sort of any piece of code that knows how to talk the language, talk the protocol. At present, there's systems that use the web front end and the clients. The Eris DAO, which was a distributed autonomous organization system written to apply for the bounty that was offered for a Bitcoin Foundation.
Yeah, I really want to go into detail on the DAO actually.
Yeah, I mean that runs as a local node server which you then connect to. So you're sort of using a web front end to that, and that's taking care of the transactions and so on. So I mean the quick answer is you interact with it on the code level pretty much however you want, but as it's a young system, the easiest way of doing so is through the clients that the Ethereum team have provided.
Okay, but that's really good, right? Let's look at some of the criticisms of it, and then we'll get into why the hell people don't actually look at this code that you've been showing us, Rob. So we've had a lot of trolls that have been frequenting the infamous Bitcointalk forum, which I often report from, and also the Ethereum subreddit, which I'll show in just a moment. And I have to give credit. I mean, this is going to be a critical show. I am critical of the way that Ethereum has been launched, but I'm broadly supportive of the idea. I actually want a lot of the products that Ethereum is promising. But the problem is that they kind of made a rod for their own back. They announced Ethereum on the Bitcoin Talk forum. They attended a lot of Bitcoin meetups, particularly in London where I am, and this was very much hyped up as the new beginning. I'll just quote here from Vitalik himself, the founder. The past 5 years have painfully demonstrated a third missing feature, a sufficiently powerful Turing-complete scripting language relating to Bitcoin. So the narrative in the first paragraph, at the top end of the first paragraph, was that Bitcoin's great and it does transactions very well, but it's kind of broken. It doesn't have this amazing thing called Turing-complete scripting language. Now, just so you know, a Turing-complete scripting language pretty much describes most of the programming languages that exist today, rather like Python and JavaScript and so on. So really, you know, we're piggybacking off of this guy called Turing, who was around in Bletchley Park in World War II and cracked a lot of the, or helped to crack a lot of the Enigma codes and help the Allies win the war. And some people have said, look, this is too hypey. And so We've had some trolls who particularly have been very good at going onto the subreddit under using sock puppet accounts, so they're deliberately setting up accounts that don't refer to their legal identities or any other identities they might have on the internet, and they are really, really laying in, and they are calling this an IPO, and that all IPO cryptos are scams. And I can speak, I should probably declare up front, in case any of you don't know, I am one of the original team members of the Feathercoin project, and Feathercoin often gets the credit or the blame, however you look at it, even from its harshest critics, that we caused a lot of this avalanche effect of cryptocurrencies. That before Feathercoin, all you really had was Namecoin and Litecoin and a few sort of really, really niche projects that didn't market themselves at all well. But then along came Feathercoin, and suddenly you had coders, geeks that could communicate. They knew how to talk, they knew how to publicize themselves, and now, because of the massive economic downtrend in these crypto markets, all these coins are pretty much down. They spike up initially and then they crash to the bottom when people start to move on to the next thing. A lot of people are calling foul, and they're saying that all of these are pretty much scams. We then had a article on CoinDesk which was pretty much just positive the whole way through. It didn't really criticize Ethereum at all. I didn't read it. I didn't see anything critical in here. And so what this does, when you present something in a purely positive light and you forget to criticize yourself, someone will do it for you. And the trolls have certainly been doing that in their spades. So along came this user, Verdalen1 on Ethereum. It's a new account, I believe. It's just been set up for this purpose. And one of the many things that this user is accusing them of is that, you know, that the narrative has changed, that we've got a Turing complete scripting language, and that this is just a buzzword. And what is happening now on this thread on Ethereum in the last 2 days is Vitalik has come in, and in my opinion, Vitalik's done a great job. I don't envy him. I've been in the same position myself, trying to field trolls on these forums, and he's handled it the best way he can. But here's where I think I do take issue. He says, I actually have an entire section in the white paper talking about how Turing completeness is completely overhyped aspect of Ethereum and does not matter too much either way. The Turing complete hype is entirely caused by the outside community that we have no control over. So I then reply and I say, actually, I think you'll find there's a video here of Charles Hoskinson in London, and I was there, in a video, and 6 minutes into the presentation, he clearly says Vitalik's genius was to say that there were no features. At Ethereum, we say we give you a Turing complete scripting language, you know, like Python, JavaScript. You can do pretty amazing things with those languages, right? What if we can combine that with a blockchain and create this incredible foundation, and say your base unit is a contract with a Turing complete system, and it's up to you to decide what features you want. And then he uses this as the basis for his claim that Ethereum is the Android of cryptocurrency. And this, in case you're interested, is the video. I can play some of this, but I'd rather not. You can just go there yourself. We then had another presentation by lead developer Gavin, whom I know and I've met on many occasions in the London scene, and he gave a presentation at the Hoxton Bar and Grill, where I think the title of it was Ethereum's Impact on Society. So you have this very expansive language here. Here we go. What does Ethereum mean for society? You have this very expansive language, this very ambitious kind of terminology, and he even, in the narrative here, about 4 minutes 50 in, Gavin, who is a PhD and a computer scientist, is going to start telling us a story about the history of computers, where they were initially, a computer was nothing more than a counting machine, but then all of a sudden you had this genius called Alan Turing, who's going to come along and describe these 6 primitives, the 6 things that a computer can do. And he's going to tell you how you can't predict what the script is going to do until you run it. And what he's doing is he's juxtaposing that with a narrative about how Bitcoin started, and yeah, it was all very good for this one thing, but actually we've done the equivalent of what Alan Turing is going to do. By juxtapositioning those 2 narratives, it implicitly tells you that this is an evolutionary step up. And in fact, Gavin even uses the term piggybacking when referring to Bitcoin, that he says that we've already piggybacked enough of a Bitcoin, and now he wants to shift the story into something more like, how can we create a fairer society? And to be fair to Gavin, he is very good at expressing the lack of fairness across society in the world today, and I genuinely believe him that he wants to create a more egalitarian society where everyone is treated on an equal playing field. But the problem is then that you have this crowd sale, right? Let me just get the small print up in the Ether sale. So you can go to ethereum.org, and despite all of the communications and the marketing and this kind of like, yeah, it's Turing complete, but actually, no, that's not such a big deal, but we kind of needed to say that in the beginning. Now you're being told by the lawyers, the legal department, which very rarely have any respect for any other departments other than their own, by the way, value judgment, sorry. It says, warning. I don't know if this is called a contract of adhesion. So look that up. Contract of adhesion is when you sign up to a product or service, but really you don't have any choice, right? Like, you're not going to read this thing, it's too long, and you end up agreeing, getting yourself involved into an agreement between another party that you don't really have control over. How ironic is this, that they're actually trying to come up with a contracting system that is more egalitarian, but then instantly they're putting you into this one-sided asymmetric negotiation. So they say, warning, cryptographic tokens of value may experience extreme volatility in pricing. Warning, the purchase of Ether has a number of risks. And then, so it goes into this and it talks about how you don't have, there's no right to a refund. So one of the differences between Kickstarter and the Ethereum pre-sale, as they're calling it, and one of the criticisms that comes up from the trolls, is that there's no refund. So you give them your email, which, if you are not careful, will also reveal your legal identity, because there are databases that one can sign up to reveal that. So you've got to set up a new email address if you want to obscure that away. It then tells you about the Ether sale, and having told you that this is not a security, that this in no way promises that the price is going to do anything at all, they then start to give you the distribution. They then start to give you some curves. Do you recognize these? You often see these kinds of curves in business plans when you're trying to persuade someone to get involved. And what I'm arguing here, and I'm welcoming any kind of criticisms or anyone who thinks that I might be misrepresenting this, I think that yeah, it's not an IPO, whatever. Just, I want to buy this now, I want to sell it later. Look at how that price is going to go down. And then look at how the price of the initial Ether sale is going to go up. I might miss out. This is a fear of missing out phenomena, FOMO, as it's often referred to as by psychologists, where, look, you've got a sort of perverse incentive structure at Ethereum. The guys have said, we don't want to take VC money because we don't want to be corrupted by an overlord who might want to wield influence. But at the same time, this shit's expensive. Today they've actually raised 4 million up to date. The Ethereum project has it in Bitcoin. And that can either be an awful lot of money if it's just a small team of programmers and it's an open source project and it's kind of like a hobby and then maybe they're working another job in the background. But if it's a full-fledged startup with a full team and offices and all this kind of thing, actually that's not very much at all, because this money has to last for the duration of the project. So what are the tensions that we're getting here between the core idea as it started as like a meta coin, as like Mastercoin and like BitShares, where you no longer had to set up your own blockchain. In fact, in the white paper, Vitalik actually says the problem is you can't scale a blockchain. You're not going to have a world where everyone has their own. So what we need is a meta chain. So do you guys feel like I do, that there's any kind of tension between the way it's been marketed and then the way that then they want to sort of take that back and have some small print that kind of waives any kind of responsibility?
Hi.
Hello, Theo.
Hi. Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, I really like the whole idea of Ethereum, and yeah, I wish that we could have just bought it when it's actually working. That's it, basically. I'd like to see, you know, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, they're just launched. And you see if they work or not, and then you can decide if you want some or not. And I wish that it was done like that rather than the pre-sale. I know that you gotta have money for the programmers and all that, like you were saying, but I think that I would have preferred that it was just launched like any other project, and then you can just see how it works. And yeah, I think that, and then you could just have it on the market, just, you know, have it live, I mean, the whole paper, and I was going through the yellow paper as much as I could yesterday because I hadn't read it before, and going through the fees and all that, and everything looks really interesting, but it's still all theoretical, and I have a big problem. I mean, just for me personally, if you want to invest in something theoretical, that's your own choice. But I mean, to me, it's a really big risk, and you know, like it says, all those warnings, all these alarms go off in my head. You know, don't do it, and danger, and I don't know. That just makes me a little, like you said, it contradicts a lot of that making a better society and all that. Yeah, it definitely does. But I guess this is the whole thing is a big experiment. We're just gonna have to see where this whole thing goes.
So, Paige?
Yeah, I find it interesting that they didn't use any sort of crowd sale, crowdfunding type infrastructure to at least give the investors some sort of something to represent what they got, what they're buying. So there's a lot of these like Counterparty and even Mastercoin and Swarm and stuff like that. There's plenty of platforms that they could have decided on to use in order to make the pre-sale a little more viable for investors. Right now, you just don't know. Like you have to see it as just wanting to support the project and wanting to see the developers continue to be able to work and make income through that. So that's how I see it. That's how I hope people are seeing it, as giving money towards this. I know they're in terms of what I experienced through the MadeSafe crowd sale. I think people. I've definitely talked to people that didn't understand the protocol. Like they just didn't invest time or just didn't, want to, but thought that the idea was really neat, and they invested anyway. That even though we had these proxy tokens to give out, it's still like there are people that just want to invest in things that they think are going to be the next big thing. And then I think they invest in these things, and then they kind of retreat back, and they like start to think, oh, maybe it's not going to be so successful, or there's a potential for it to not be so successful. And then they start thinking of it as kind of just, I'm supporting this project. I hope that's how a lot of people are seeing the Ethereum crowd sale for now.
Well, the average purchase price, as Christoph pointed out in Bitcoin Group on Friday, the average purchase price is 3 Bitcoins. And to me, that's a modal average. Like he's just looking at the trend. And to me, that says this isn't people like Rob, right? How many Ether did you buy? Do you want to tell us, Rob?
I can't remember how many Ether it is. It was about $20 worth. I mean, just
okay.
enough to set up some contracts.
Validated my point. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
The average developer isn't going to buy these Ether as a consumer would. What's happening? I mean, some of the buy orders. Let me just give you the straight from blockchain.info. Let's just see. It ranked in terms of size. The largest one we had was almost 500 Bitcoin. In fact, that's just the miners fee, so that's 500 Bitcoins, 466, 227, 149, 99 Bitcoins. These are not developers looking to try and set up some kind of eBay for art, right? They are clearly buying this as a speculative investment. And, Ksenia, I mean, what do you think of all of this? What do you make of it?
Yeah, well, I really like this view that it's actually sort of a little bit of a philanthropy, because you can't invest in this kind of technology and kind of say, okay, I really know what I'm doing, and but at the same time, most of the time, if it's this kind of ambitious engineering kind of projects, if you wait for like a ready product which is safe, you end up with something funded by the army and this kind of stuff, if you know what I mean. So it's sort of it will be interesting to actually see some examples of who actually invested this like big chunks of money into it.
Well, that's part of the problem, of course, is that we don't know, and it would be a conflict of interest, I think, for Ethereum to tell us.
Politically and culturally, it will be just interesting to see whether it's I don't know who actually decided to invest in it. Yeah.
So what are we to do then? If Vitalik's got a problem, let me maybe let's try and couch it in these terms. Okay. So here's what I think. Here's what I think is the problem. It's this lot of people. No, not Vitalik, not Gavin, not Jeff. Okay, and Stefan as well, I see working very hard in London organising the meetups, and then you've got some of the creatives, Richard Scott, but who the hell is everyone else? And who are all these people? And then when you look at like Jonathan Mohan, who is this? Jerry Liu, there's a lot of people here. And now, of course, you've got the advisors. I was really impressed to see Ralph Merkle, who is the inventor of the Merkle tree, which is such an integral part to Bitcoin's blockchain and by far one of my favorite features in it. But what are all these other people doing? And are they just free riders? Are these just people that have been, you know, drawn to something they see as a lot of potential, but do they actually understand the underlying philosophy? And where are their commits on GitHub? Because I've been through the GitHub commitments, and it's mostly coming from the guys, you know, at the top of this list. And by the way, this page with the team has been moved around a few times. I actually struggled to find this. It was kind of buried, and then it was kind of in one of the threads that Vitalik posted in response to someone else who had a similar question. And if you look at their intent on the how they're going to be spending these funds, because they've also produced a spreadsheet, how quaint, on how, you know, where all the funds have come from. This is in fiat, so they can't do this on a blockchain. Look at this. Expenses incurred prior to and related to Genesis sale, that's what's happening now, $1.8 million. That is a lot of money. So somehow between November and now, it's on GitHub, because I've been through the GitHub commitments, and it's mostly coming from the guys this list. And by the way, this page with the team moved around times. Thank you, whoever that was. So yeah, like 1.8 million is a lot.
They didn't they sponsor a lot of things? Like especially the Toronto conference and stuff like that. It seems like a lot of what they were blowing through at first was just the marketing and like trying to get their name out there and the hype.
And also, I've heard that they've got a place in Switzerland as well. I saw that somewhere. So they've got an office in Toronto. They've got an office in Switzerland. They've copied the Mozilla model of corporate structure. So it's a non-profit that owns a profit-making company, and so you've kind of got this weird accountability structure that I've looked into, and it looks pretty legally anyway. It's pretty tight, and it basically means that when you give your money to this crowd, to this pre-sale. This goes to a multi-signature wallet that is run by a company in Switzerland, presumably because they don't want to get into trouble with any foreign territories or be accused of operating a securities fundraiser. So you've kind of got this. I think what's happening is that the project has been, to some extent, hijacked by a group of people who aren't really adding any tangible value to the project itself. You've got the developers at the top who are the ones with the real power. And then you've got the people below that, what are they, like affiliate marketers, essentially? What are they doing? They're going to meetups and they're talking about it? How is that not a multi-level marketing scheme?
At one point, I believe they had 8 founders, and then I think they kind of restructured after that point. But I think they've been going through kind of scaling down to some extent. Looking back at that team page, I think there's a lot of people on the contributors section that were at one point kind of a part of the main team, and so I think they're I don't know what they're doing, but they've definitely gone through a lot of organizational restructuring and determining who may or may not be, you know, giving the most value to the project, although there is a lot of administration and business development listed as
These are nebulous job titles, and if you've ever been involved in a startup, I can tell you the first thing that happens if it's going to gain any type of traction is everyone and their dog turns up, and they want to hire their girlfriend, they want to hire the father who's recently retired and wants a part-time job doing bookkeeping, and it becomes very nepotistic. But that's what most companies are. They're just a group of people getting together and then agreeing on how they can sell this product or service to other people for more than they bought it for. But as a result, I just see that if we don't say something now, given that this crowd sale is going to go up in price in 10 days' time or whatever it is, my concern is that when the price of Ether is scheduled to go up, I think that a lot of people are going to have this fear of missing out phenomena, which is the best signal your mind can give you not to buy, by the way. But what's going to happen is people are going, oh, if I don't buy this, I'm going to really regret it. And then they're just going to jump in, they're going to think, well, how much should I put in? And what they start to do is they start making mental projections. And so I'm just worried that we're going to get this psychological, the same way we had with all these other altcoins, Dogecoin. What happens is the market crashes and people lose faith, a bit like that troll was saying. And also we have David who's just joined us. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of a Cornwall with very dodgy internet connection. I've been watching on YouTube, but yeah, I decided to see if the connection is good enough to actually contribute.
Yeah, sounds good. So what do you want to say about this? Where are you coming from?
Yeah, picking up on from what I heard you just talking about recently, I think it's a classic problem of some very well-intentioned geeks building something that's incredibly important and transformative for the world, but being caught up in a hype. And the legal structures they've adopted and the management structures and the sort of people that get attracted to a project of this nature have clashed with the original intention of developers who just basically want to make shit and they want to get it out there. And you've got this problem, which is then amplified, if you like, by trolls, social media, and what have you, which I think you're pointing out can end up being very damaging to people who don't understand all the technology and are scared of these sorts of issues. And if you don't then trust the people in the middle of the whole hornet's nest, that can be damaging. On the other hand, I think what will really count is the actual applications that are initially built with Ethereum, rather than the particular theory and whether the platform itself is run in a certain way or not. I think a lot will depend on what people do with it. So yeah, that's roughly where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and we have a similar thing. Now, Nick, before the show, I want you and Rob to kind of have this conversation because you had some real concerns with the choice of that algorithm. Because let's look at what the trolls are saying. I'm sanitizing a lot of what the trolls are saying on Bitcointalk forum, because despite the fact that they do, are very angry anonymous people, they do raise some points, and one of them was the one that you found, which is this control by the botnet, that the botnet can take over the network.
Yeah. Sorry, is my mic unmuted? Oh, there it goes. Yeah, I was trying to find yesterday just how the network is secured and how contracts are executed, and if this could be attacked by a botnet, because Vitalik up front in the white paper says ASICs are bad, they lead to centralization. I don't hold that view. I think that's the opposite. But that's the view that he holds, and I'm just curious how they plan to protect from people who have 1 million infected computers. And if you can be attacked by 1 million infected computers, you can be attacked by someone with a decent-sized data center. Right. So the way the Ether works is actually quite genius. When you're mining Ether, what you're actually doing is making these contracts Turing complete. You're solving a problem that actually makes the thing work. So it's not just like with Bitcoin where you're just mining these random numbers and not really producing any utility or any direct utility. There is an ancillary benefit, as I understand it, to this algorithm. But what you're saying is that the type of chips, and I believe Vitalik's phrase in the white paper was, we want it so that as the ASICs improve, what they're actually doing is improving the state of processors generally, because these will be
regular processors that will work in consumer hardware, so they want a commodity-based algo. But the downside is that I can just set up a server farm. I can just rent out some instances on AWS, on Amazon's cloud, and just point them at this network, and then, you know, what, crowd everyone out? What's the downside? A 51% attack, or?
Yeah, what is the exact outcome of a 51% attack, Rob? Is it changes the contract's outcome, right?
Rob?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, can I come in?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, a 51% attack would, as with Bitcoin, allow you to determine the state of reality on the blockchain. In terms of how effective a botnet attack would be, it requires Ether to run a transaction on the Ethereum network. So if you set up a large botnet to send transactions into the Ethereum network, you're basically setting up a large cost for yourself. Now, given that the proof of work scheme used in Bitcoin was originally developed to disincentivize spam, basically, if you're trying to attack the Ethereum network by sending but with a flood attack, by sending lots and lots and lots of transactions to it, you're basically at best cutting off your nose to spite your face, because you'll have to have bought an awful lot of Ether in order to do that. If you try and attack the network with a 51% attack, then yeah, the system is susceptible to that, but most cryptocurrencies as currently implemented are susceptible to that, so that's not unique to Ethereum. I mean, what Ethereum certainly can't do is host a botnet which will attack itself, because whilst the Ethereum scripting language is Turing complete until it runs out of money. So it's not Turing complete in the computer science sense. It certainly does all the things you would expect a Turing complete language to do, but it only does them as long as the contract has Ether. So you can't set up a botnet on the Ethereum network which will go out and attack other websites, because there's no network access, and you can't set up a botnet on the Ethereum network which will effectively attack Ethereum itself, because you'll have to pay in order to do so. So I mean, there's a couple of different attack scenarios. One is common to most blockchain environments. The other is mitigated by Ethereum's technical design.
Is that good for you, Nick? You satisfied?
Yeah, I guess that works. I'm just curious. Like I said, they can change the outcome though, right? Because full nodes, there's a census on the outcome of the contract, right? And that's how we know what the outcome was supposed to be in Turing complete. If I had a certain amount of the network, I could just hijack your contract, and then that would be the contract from then further on. So I would only have to do it one time.
Yeah, I mean that's the principle, but it's the same as with Bitcoin. And the advantage to having a single system for this, like Ethereum, rather than having lots of task-specific blockchains, is if you're worried about your contract suffering a 51% attack, and I'm worried about my contract suffering a 51% attack, we can pool our computing resources to sort of process and hash both, and then we've got twice the security we would otherwise have. So it's a technical possibility, but the idea is to get everyone's contracts together, everyone processing each other's contracts, and so that a 51% attack is only as likely as for any other cryptocurrency, which unfortunately, as with the ghash.io incident recently, we've seen isn't a theoretical possibility any longer, but it's a social problem as much as it's a technical problem, and it's one that I think people have been sufficiently spooked by that people sort of are going to make sure that the single pool doesn't take over the state of reality for the Ethereum blockchain.
Well, one thing is certain is that we don't know. We don't really know anything, and I think one of the biggest criticisms here is that this has been launched too early because the founders were under pressure to raise money, because a lot of them had to give up their day jobs. It's still true, unfortunately, that our landlords can exert more rent or rent side pressure on us to live on this physical reality, then we can extract rent in an online reality. And even though, you know, Deleuze and early sort of thinkers chose the word virtual when describing the internet, not because it's not real, but because they're virtuous. What goes online is what is important to us because we are unhindered. Where you go online is based on what you care about. And as a result, the internet reveals to us and reflects back at us our passions and our angst. And as a result, even though you've got this generation, and I include all of us in this, that we come from this generation that is a tech-savvy generation. Many of us don't remember life before the internet. I do, but only just. And don't remember life before the mobile phone. And we've got something that we want to do, but we're kind of being starved off by these states that exert rent side pressure. They're not really adding any value. And is that not the real root cause of why good projects like Ethereum are being forced into these kind of crowd sale tactics? And then we've got open-ended questions like, what about a bot attack? Well, it wouldn't matter if you'd launched it already, because we'd know. So why not leave this until October? Why not crowdfund 3 months before delivery?
Is there a cap on the amount of sale?
Nope. So one of the more interesting, you bring up a good point. One of the more interesting things is that they're not capping, there's no markup on the number of coins. So you are deciding how many ether there will be by purchasing ether.
Okay.
The more you buy, the more there will be. It's an interesting approach.
Yeah, that is interesting. Well, that's not necessary because so in that sense that means that this is the only ether that's going to exist? Don't the miners get...
No, you have that. Did you see that curve on the small print where they actually showed that it will be an inflationary supplies, but the inflation will die down over time?
But it's being inflated through the mining process of the...
Yeah, I believe so. They're comparing it to the oil. They're saying that the ether is like oil, which is ridiculous because it doesn't weigh anything, and you know it can be used. The problem with all these digital securities, Bitcoin introduced the notion of digital scarcity. It allowed for existence to emerge in a way that could be subtractive as you communicated it, so that when I give you something, I instantly don't have it. It's not like sharing an MP3. And as a result, all of these crypto assets, if you like, are actually currency. So it doesn't matter what you call it. You call it gold, you can call it oil, but the fact is this thing moves at the speed of an email at costs approaching zero.
So, sorry, I just want to clarify. I was specifically referencing the crowd sale cap. Is there a cap to how much they're accepting?
Nope. The more you buy, the more ether there will be. You are bringing it into existence.
But there's going to be more ether no matter what, anyway, because it's inflationary.
Yeah, but you're defining I believe you're defining the start point.
Okay, all right. So, and then that also means that there's no cap for how much money they can make.
Correct. Yes.
So, yeah.
The really interesting period to watch will be this 14-day cutoff. That's when I'm going to probably do another show and actually show what's going to happen there, because I'm going to have the blockchain. If you look at the taint analysis on blockchain.info, I'll put the links down below after the show. You should be able to Google it pretty easily, just ether sale blockchain.info. And what's interesting is there is one person with 7% of the entire supply so far, right? One person with 7%. And this isn't really anyone's fault, but it's everyone's responsibility to address it. As Rob says, and as David was saying, this is a social phenomena that we need to address. Theo, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to get something straight in my head. I'm just not sure. So, okay, they've got the pre-sale, and that determines how much ether there is. And then when it's live and people are mining, I have to fuel my. So the way I understand it is that I have to fuel my contract with ether, and I do that by determining the price of gas for my contract. So it's kind of confusing. I mean, you got oil and gas and all that kind of stuff. But basically, to put it in a simple way, I can just I can decide how expensive. It's kind of like transaction fees in Bitcoin. If I put no transaction fee, the transaction will probably go through, but it will take forever. And if I put a pretty normal transaction fee, then it'll go through pretty quickly. So I can do that with Ethereum. But my question is there going to be like a kind of block reward also that's going to, like, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Is it generated like Bitcoin, or is that this pre-sale is it, and it's just the oil that's put on top of the Ethereum fire that is getting spit back out?
All these analogies are what corrupt this process, though, isn't it? It's like, because none of these analogies work. Well, no, it's not your fault. It's our fault. We're limited by our language.
Yeah.
And the thing is, none of these analogies really work. They work for a while until they stop, and then everything breaks down, and people have got to start thinking again. That's why I didn't like the whole Android for cryptocurrency analogy that they were using.
Yeah, I agree, but that's what it says in the yellow paper. It has the fees there for the contract. That's what I was really wondering about. And it says, okay, the fee, it's like it depends on how complicated your contract is. I don't know it by heart, but let's say default is 1 gas to start anything, suicide is 0, and like, I don't know, saving 1 byte of data is 1 gas or something like that. And I was kind of like trying to figure out, okay, well, what's gas? How do I get gas? Well, you get gas with the Ethereum, so it just makes it even more confusing to me. But I mean, I guess if you get into it and you use it a few times, it makes sense. To me, it's just really similar. It's just the transaction fee, basically. And it's just more complicated because your transaction fee is going to be higher depending on how complicated or how complex or what your contract is doing. So different applications will have. I think that's how I understand it so far. Am I on the right track?
Yeah. What this is going to do is it's going to produce what's called as the elasticity of demand, where the supply and demand curve for Ether is going to be a very interesting thing to watch, because on the one hand you're providing lots of demand side pressure because these contracts are going to cost a lot, because the miners are taking a certain amount of opportunity cost, that risks that they're spending electricity on their computers. Unlike Bitcoin, they're not playing the kind of latency chance where the variance where maybe they'll get a block and maybe they won't, and maybe they go 5 days in a row without finding a single block. At least with Ethereum, you are doing a computationally functional process where you're making the script Turing complete. However, it is going to create when the physics and the code starts to touch the economics, the human action, you're going to get some interesting supply curve dynamics, because what you have, even in the global currency market, a 5 trillion per day market, you've got a bunch of mostly men, let's face it, in glass buildings wearing suits, sitting at computer screens, trading these currencies in a context completely divorced of real world on the ground situations. So as I'm going out in the real world and buying milk and things like this, I'm pricing in my sentiment in a very small and granular way, and then you've got this $5 trillion a day pricing in sentiments based on greed. I mean, they actually are buying this stuff, so it goes up in value, and then we all have to suffer the consequences. And you're going to have the same thing in Ethereum, where people are buying up 7% of the supply because they want to control it, and they can because they're hiding behind a hash, and they're just obscured away. Their identities, their actions isn't tied with their identity, so they think they can get away with this. They think they can do this, and then they start producing. As smart as Vitalik is, being smart does not mean you are right. History is not on his side for just being clever on its own, because a lot of the time the biggest threats you face are the ones you can't anticipate.
Yeah, definitely. But I think another reason that is not exactly true here, that what you're talking about is all the speculation and stuff that we have today, is because people are trading these assets. The guys in suits you were talking about are trading assets, but nobody is calling for delivery. You see what I mean? They're allowed to create.
They're not taking responsibility.
Exactly. So they're allowed to create, virtual. Well, I don't want to say virtual, but inflate. I think the amount of gold certificates that exist is like 2,000 times what's mined every year. So it's not possible. And with Ethereum, I think that's not exactly. You can't do that. See what I mean? So it's not exactly the same as the Forex guy is trading, because you can't, unless somebody makes a future Ethereum certificate, but that has nothing to do with Ethereum directly.
But if people, like what's happening at the moment is that we are positioning ourselves economically so that we buy things based on other people's perceived need of them. So I don't buy, like in England at the moment, everyone's buying housing because someone else will need it, and that's not going to go away. So we're very good at empathizing with one another. We're very good at anticipating other people's needs and demands in the market, which is the entrepreneurial spirit. But then the second chapter of entrepreneurialism, the bit where you try to de-risk an uncertain environment, that goes out of the window. Now you're here to introduce artificial risk because I'm not selling you this house unless you top tick the market, right? I'm going to hold back and I'm going to try and sell at the top, which has nothing to do with your needs. So I've understood you and I've related to you, but I'm not your friend, as in I'm not trying to work in your interests.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's, well, now it's too late now. It's already, the pre-sale has already started, and so we're just going to have to see what happens in, I guess, fourth quarter 2015 or whenever it launches. There's so much stuff that could happen. That's an eternity in crypto. It's like a whole lifetime. You know what I mean? I mean, just think about how old is Dogecoin? What, less than a year? I mean, come on, you know. I mean, this stuff is really, that's such a long time. So many things can happen between then and now. So we don't really know what's gonna happen in the meantime. Yeah.
Well, let's go to the Q&A, because whilst we've been talking, we've had people been watching the video. If you click in the bottom left-hand corner of this video, click on the Q&A, it will take you to another area to watch this video with some questions and answers. So we have a question from a long-time viewer, Tony P., who says, the way I heard it announced at first was that your input provided the tokens. So to me, IPO is totally unethical and really disappointed me. So what we're saying is, look, they're saying one thing. It's kind of an Orwellian doublespeak. They're wanting to have their cake and eat it. They're trying to use what Plato referred to as rhetoric, which is the careful use of language so that it literally means one thing, it actually means something else. Like when I say, yeah, right, I literally mean yes, affirmative. I actually mean, because of the tone of my voice, no. And as a result, you're getting this kind of dichotomous relationship where you've got people like Rob who are buying $20 worth, which is a perfectly sensible thing to do. And then you're getting people that are trying to buy up or own the market with 7% of the share. Then we have a question from Maura, who says 14 million. It's only a matter of time before pre-selling crypto coins runs afoul of the IPO laws and devs get into legal trouble. Yeah, I've thought about this as well, actually. Is there going to, do you think that if this all goes tits up and we end up making a real fuck up of this as a community in general, do you think the authorities are going to start coming after us with retroactive laws saying, look, actually, technically, if we shift the definition here, here, and here of this case law, 100 years ago, I think you'll find you guys actually were breaking the law after all.
I think either way they're gonna use it against the movement and trying to regulate how. I mean, same with MateSafe, the whole like IPO versus crowd sale. It's definitely rhetoric, but that is the reason why they're doing it. I don't think Ethereum is not calling it an IPO because they don't want to. They want to make it seem a different way to the users. I think they're hoping that the users see it as it is, but just because of legalese and regulation, they are calling it a pre-sale, and I think that's the best way to go about doing it. So.
Also, the Satoshi model's dead, right? Like, nobody can just come and slowly work on a project and it slowly leaks out and builds up. That's just not possible anymore in this environment. It's already happened, and now you kind of have to let everybody know about it before you're going to release it, at least somewhat, right? Because you don't want to release it and have somebody steal your network from you right away or anything like that, because there was no build-up.
Yeah, like I say, they've all got to pay their rent at the end of the day. So they are incentivized. Aristotle had this definition of friendship. I can't remember exactly, but it was something like two people working in one another's interest, to promote one another's interests. That was it. The problem with running a company is that you've got two types of people outside, the ones that are paying you and the ones that aren't. And that it's a very binary. Being in sales is a very binary. I've never been in sales, but I've seen other people who have. And they are just there to sell. Right? Because if you don't, you get sold. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to put the non-customer, as they call it, they don't even refer to people as names, they're actually items on a spreadsheet or a CRM, a customer relationship management software. You get given a unique ID, you're a bunch of numbers, and you are there to be converted in the term. You're put into a sales funnel, you're ranked in terms of your likelihood to buy, and then the sales officer will then rank that spreadsheet in terms of probability to convert. They then start hammering you with marketing literature and spam and all this kind of thing, because they've seen the research, and the research tells them if you send this person 5 emails and then put in a phone call and say, how are you today, or this kind of thing, then you're more likely to buy. But then you're not buying it because you want it or because the other person gives a crap about you. They're selling it to you because that's what they're told to do, and it creates this anti-friendship. It actually creates a society where all the incentives are aligned for us to not be friends, because we're not here to promote one another's interests. We're here to promote our own at the expense of others.
What I fear might happen is that we might see some people try to copycat this whole launch in a bad way. You know what I mean? There'll be some other IPO coming out, and it's like I don't know, call it super smart crypto or whatever, and they're going to say, yeah, we're building a thing. It's kind of like it's even better than Ethereum, and it never comes to be. The whole point was just to hype, to piggyback on the whole media thing and just to do an IPO scam, basically. And I fear that some people are going to watch that and some people are going to fall for that. You know what I mean? I think that's going to be a new trend, that people are going to try to scam out, this whole, they're going to call everything smart, and maybe they'll use diesel instead of gas, or I don't know what. But I have, it's just a matter of time.
This is the ethanol of cryptocurrency. It's the ethanol.
Yeah. Exactly. It said, yeah, forget Android. We're beyond the Android of crypto. We're in the next level. And we're going to be ready in 2016. We just need the funding. Send us the bitcoins. And I hope everyone. I give people a chance. I hope they have good intentions, but I'm sure some people are watching this whole thing and they're thinking, okay, what can we do? How can we do this and get if they got, how many bitcoins did they raise again? Or Ethereum so far?
Like 8,000 or something.
Okay, if they say, if we get 10% of what they got, then we're fine. You know what I mean? So we just gotta, get this hype train going, and launch some weird thing and just put smart in front of it, and then we're ready to go. So I think everyone has to, do their due diligence in the next time and be careful. But new people enter the community, and it's a shame that some people, they get interested in crypto, and then they might actually fall for something like that, because it's also, that's, we just have to educate people about what they need to look for, I think.
It's the same thing with the altcoins too, so I don't know. I think the whole space is pretty dangerous, and it's all about educating people and making them aware of their actions.
I see, from my point of view, two main dangers. One is the fact that, Ethereum's got wider purpose and remit than just, if you like, making money and dealing with the financial system. It's also got to do fundamentally with any basis in which individuals want to make some sort of arrangement between them. So, we can look at, voting, any form of decision making. Now, the two main problems with the way it's been done is, one, it's come out of really the Bitcoin community, and I don't know what you guys think about in terms of Bitcoin-style meetups, but probably the ones that I've been to, 7 or 8 out of 10 people who go to those meetups around the world are speculators. Okay, they're not people genuinely interested in reforming, I don't know, the way society works, or the way law works, or the way democracy works, or the way that the currency system works. But basically, a lot of people crowd into that because it's kind of fun, it's anarchistic, and they see an opportunity to make a lot of money. And these people, when they pile into a project like Ethereum, because they've got the training, they've got the background, they've got the concepts, are potentially dangerous to the project. Right? That's the one of the dangers I see. The second danger is the lawyers and the legal structure that has been provisionally couched around the Ethereum project until it becomes a decentralized organization. Again, the sorts of lawyers, stateside largely, that are initially attracted to this in terms of IPOs, in terms of protections, in terms of security, don't have that. Their interests aren't, and their culture isn't aligned necessarily to the social or the development or the other aspirations. So you have two extremely powerful sets of forces, individuals, whether these be from the financial and sector or from the legal sector, crowding in what, from my point of view, would have made a perfect kind of open source project without any money involved, right? Now, there's a balance to be struck between those things, and I think Ethereum also, there is something in the nature of the individuals, the kind of crypto geeks, that they're drawn to these projects because of certain sort of frustrations in their personal life. That they tend to be quite introverted. They tend to not be very good judges of other people's character, or they tend to be on the autistic spectrum, if you like. And this means that when unscrupulous people get involved, or people who maybe speak the right speak and are very bright, you end up getting an organization which is a dangerous mixture of personalities and interests. And I think one of the things, and I've had a few conversations about that, but one of the things that is really interesting and important is to get the legal structure of Ethereum right. I think that just dealing with it as it is being dealt with at the moment isn't sufficiently open, and isn't sufficiently, is too easy to knock down, and is too easy to corrupt. And I think I've been involved, going back about 15 years, with a number of sort of cryptocurrency type sort of projects where where people have been waiting for the technical infrastructure to manage their own process, and in the meantime they've just come up with a default legal kind of structure, and they've barely got round to voting, and they certainly haven't sorted out their own internal social project management infrastructure. And when it comes down to it, what really counts with a project like Ethereum is how well that team works together, and how well the internal team work with the external community. And this is a very social thing, and I think that intellectually Ethereum's very strong, but empathetically and socially it's a little weak.
Right. So this is what Ksenia brought up at the beginning, and maybe we should just focus on the last part of the show about this more societal angle, which is that I'm trying to build right now a distributed autonomous organization within the World Crypto Network, just using the tools that we have available at the time, right now, which is Bitcoin Armory software and the multi-signature. And I've been approached by BitShares, and also Blackcoin have also reached out to me today. Of course, they all want to promote their own product, and I'm happy to kind of give it a go. I actually want, like Ksenia is saying, like, I want to be a use case. Like, please let me try out your technology, because I am one of these enthusiastic adopters who isn't doing this for money. I want to see, you know, profit just means progress, but what kind of progress do we want to see? Do we want to see, do we want to turn everything into money, or do we want to turn everything into a kind of a social justice?
Yeah, I agree 100% on that. I mean, I think there's a lot that can be done outside the, if you like, the crypto space, and I think Ethereum and the technology represents about 30% of what is needed to make a project successful in this space. And I am hugely excited and optimistic and skeptical and daunted by this space, but I mean, one thing that you can do a hell of a lot with is just existing legal structures, surprisingly enough. With certain legal structures, I mean, you can create multinational, international organizations with thousands, and if you nest them with millions of members from around the world. You can use software for voting in all sorts of ways, whether we use liquid democracy, whether you use cryptocurrencies in some way for voting. And these are legal structures that you can also embed, like creative social techniques that have come out of movements like Occupy, and before that, because within partnership and other forms of law, you don't need to bring lawyers in to make your agreements, which default to one member, one vote, but you can actually make agreements down the pub based on a shake of hand, based on a video you upload to YouTube. And what I'm really interested in doing is a form of agile development for law, in which you prototype the legal arrangements using basic law, but using basic human agreements which are transparently documented, let's say in video, and when they're tested out and interested enough to the wider community who own the project legally, right, then they can be coded, hard-coded, let's say into Ethereum. And that way you drive the development through social purpose and through use, and that way you also offer basic legal protection as well as the crypto protection. I think the danger is, and even in this conversation, which has been a great hangout, you can see it being highly skewed towards crypto, you know, the dangers of 51% takeover. But very interesting academic kind of conversations, which are philosophical and very. I'm totally into them, but really we all know that the biggest, you know, the biggest hacks in terms of anything crypto are just, you know, the people and whether you can get at them one way or another, and so, and the basic legal infrastructure and so forth. And I think that we need to do two things. We need to get a pilot in a space which it communicates to the public that this is not, you know, FIFA we're talking about, or not some weird scam on, you know, funded by the NSA or by some drug cartel. But this is a genuinely transformational potential that can transform real lives. So we need a pilot which communicates to people, which is scalable. We need a basic legal structure which is robust, and we need the third part, which is the Ethereum crypto side. And if we put those three together, I think we've got we're on the right track.
So why is everyone then crowding around these troll cesspits and not on the actual GitHub? Because what you're describing, it's similar to what Tolstoy was talking about in War and Peace, where he diagnoses the problem of human conflict by the dichotomy between necessity and consciousness. So there are the decisions that I make as a conscious being, and then there are the decisions that nature makes. And isn't cryptography something of an answer to that, where the necessity that I create as a conscious being, that which is aware of itself, so I can be meta-aware of my own actions. That's what defines me as a conscious being. If you think of biology as the study of systems copying systems, then it becomes the entropy in the universe. If you were God, right, from God's eye view, look at not like a Christian one, but just any kind of entity that is able to cognize the sum total of all information in the universe, then what you see are sort of endomorphic and these kind of, I don't know what you call it, I suppose entropic movements. Like what you'd see in the data as God is you'd see movement from life as being distinctly different from necessity, what Heidegger called the time-free movement of nature, where God, looking at the sum total of all the universe, would just see 1 + 1 = 2 for the enlarging entropy of the space, and he'd just see that as, yeah, axiomatic and pretty much true and predictable. But then he'd see life movement, and that would be altogether more unpredictable. It would look distinctly different. So when we've got cryptography, we are talking about, you're talking about the persistent witness. The witness that look at how many cameras that we've produced in the last 70, 80 years, the proliferation of witnessing, where now I can be asynchronic with the world. I don't have to be somewhere in order to witness it. I can co-witness it with people on the ground that carry these phones everywhere with them, and they're taking pictures of everything. And so if an asteroid or some meteor crashes in Russia, well, that's okay, because everyone's got these cameras in their windscreens because of all the hit and run phenomena, and so they're recording all of this stuff in real time. I can have a relationship. I can de-distance. I can make myself conscious of this event over here. And doesn't the cryptographic hash, when I'm videoing, as you say, like in English and Welsh law, everything that is spoken is as good as written? I think it was in the Magna Carta, that's right, because you had a lot of the population that were illiterate at the time, and we didn't want to exclude people that couldn't read and write from the legal process. So even if I'm just in a pub and I say, yeah, I'll build that thing for you, and we agree a price, we have what's called the meeting of minds in law, you can now hash that video. You can put it into what Robin's saying, you can create a distributed hash table. I can then upload that to a blockchain so that now I can prove the existence of that agreement at that point in time or earlier. I can say this definitely took place.
Yeah, that's right. You're nuts though, Chris. I love it. Yes, basically the crypto plus the networks enables the scaling of empathy, which has never really happened before. Right? So, you know, the history of, if you like, power has been, you know, take some really shitty, simple, minimalistic, hierarchical systems, marry them with steel and weapons, and that's effectively the only way you could scale. You could get these kind of strange religions that would pop up that really got at something kind of deep that people cared about in some sort of way. They did quite a good job of scaling, but they tended to only really succeed when they married themselves with the nation state and military forces of one form or another. And that's largely because the sort of sophistication and the complexity of those sort of on the ground, you know, that our full senses can you know, when we're talking to another human being or just walking around somewhere in nature or what have you, it's like we've got a huge bandwidth of data coming into us, and we've got a huge amount of processing power within the individual human being to, and their history and their lives and what has been passed down to them through families and culture. Really rich senses going on there, but so far we've only been able to transfer that either through brute physical violence in some sort of military thing, through a coin that someone gave us in the market, or through a vote that we stick in a box once every 4 years. And we immediately go through a tiny bandwidth bottleneck. And you can scale all those votes, or you can scale all those coins, and you can create a global system which has huge power to transform society and in fact dominate the individual culture and language that small cultures and organizations have. But you've got this bandwidth problem. Now, when I was working with Liquid Democracy back in sort of late 90s and early sort of 2000, I dropped my interest specifically in the technical and the cryptographic and the network problem, because I could see that it was just being picked up by people who were just interested in individuals shuffling tokens across the network, right? And that is great. But it's not the only problem. The other problem is you miss out on a huge amount of stuff if your initial sensors are very low quality. So if you've just got people watching adverts and bumbling around and not talking to each other and voting on a network, you're going to have shit decisions being made, no matter how good the network is, right? You want people to meet and discuss things at length with the right input and the right information going into that group, and the quality of the debate and so forth to be really good, and then to scale that across the network if you're going to get decent political decisions. Now, what something like Ethereum does, if you marry it in the right way to social processes, is it allows you to scale, small scale, high quality decision or contemplation or action by individuals in ways which marries our ability to use sort of rich and sophisticated as of yet, I mean, if you look at the number of legal structures we've got in society, there's like 6 of them, and there were like 4, 100 years ago. I mean, they don't evolve very quickly, and they don't, they don't change, and yet the rest of the technological and social basis of society is exponential growth, and the two have got completely out of sync. And what we really need to do is up the ante in terms of the number of experiments that you were talking about, Chris, in terms of and we want to do that in a safe space as well, because this is fundamentally dealing with power, and you can, you're talking Pol Pot, you're talking Stalin, you're talking when you fuck with legal social structures, you can, however idealistic you start out, you can really do some serious damage. So I think there's a lot of naivety in the space, and what we really need is a sandbox where we can play and we can really test out that this stuff works before rolling out in large scale with regard to people's basic social infrastructure and incomes.
This is what Rob was talking about earlier. The fact is that there is a test now out there, and people can. I think one of the barriers, isn't it, Rob, is that you have to compile the software with Homebrew first. Well, certainly I do, because I'm on OS 10. So
I mean, yeah,
it's not a single click.
Now, yeah, I mean, the Ethereum team are now providing downloads for a build of the current proof of concept clients. So I mean, certainly on the Mac, you previously needed to homebrew it, or on Linux, you had to have the build tools on there. But you can, if you want to try out the testnet, download the clients pre-built from Ethereum. I mean, in terms of the social structures that smart contracts plug into, I think distributed autonomous organizations can relate to the kind of work that's being done at the moment, trying to use charitable trusts and LLCs and other fairly conventional legal organizations to create socially transformative projects, to extend the kind of legal hacks that we're seeing there into sort of social hacks implemented in code. What I think one of the reasons there is so much legalese in the Ethereum pre-sale, and there's so many sort of advisors and legal actors around the project, is this is new legal ground. This is as new as free software, open source was in the early 90s. People don't know how saying this one bit of information in this bit of code running on a network relates to my right to enter your home, to my vote within an organization, to my purchase or hiring of a car. I mean, Primavera De Filippi's talk at the Berkman Center about precisely how smart contracts are or are not contracts, and how this running code on the Ethereum system relates to law has some very, very good questions and some interesting insights into this. But I mean, in terms of having a safe space to experiment with this, I think that having this kind of either socially or legally naive view of things can help people to believe that's possible, and as long as they're not then captured by Stalinist or Pol Pot-esque individuals, that does create a useful space for investigation and play. I mean, there are running examples of sorry, bear with me. There are running examples of, I mean, people are referring to them as DAOs, as decentralized autonomous organizations. They're sort of running social systems on the testnet. There's Doug, which is the original one. There's the People's Republic of Doug, which is like a social game universe. You can register as a citizen, you can vote on things, you can hold conversations, you can own notional property. And then based on that, there's the ERIS system, which I mentioned earlier, which was intended as an actual functioning organization to be available to replace the Bitcoin Foundation. So I mean, there are experiments on the blockchain at the moment. There is running code that people can look at and say, this works, this doesn't, let's play with this, let's start building up to something more industrial strength, more legally and socially and technically robust. But one of the things I absolutely do like about the current state of Ethereum is its resemblance to the early web, that sense of openness and possibility, and the fact that, with the exception of burning X amount of ether, at the moment you are free to play with something that isn't fully defined, but which has great potential for use constructively in society.
Well, yeah, I mean, it all sounds very ambitious. So I guess we should just sum up then. Do any of you have some brief final thoughts?
Well, I would like to say on the DAO aspect, I mean, isn't it starting small where you want to start anyways with something like that? You don't want to give these entities huge swaths of social power immediately. You know, who's going to pay for the electric bill is a good way to start a DAO or something.
That's very good. We should, Rob, you and I should definitely do a show where we actually go through some of this stuff, because I would say that the biggest problem Ethereum has right now is the fact that Vitalik is very, very young. He doesn't have any managerial experience, and I think the problem is they've got a human resources problem. The problem is that the people along the top here are probably all very hard-working and are making provable commitments to the code. The problem is when you start going down the list and you start looking at all of the expenses and having all these kind of this sort of drain game. I mean, people teach what they need to learn the most, and many of these companies that have brought in these social revolutions like Google, and they've changed our habits on a yearly basis, often don't practice what they preach internally. Google's internal search engine apparently is notoriously bad. Even though they're very good at helping everyone else find what they want to learn, they're not very good at doing it for themselves. And I sort of think that I'd certainly like to blur the line between the consumer and the employee. And I think if you like Ethereum, you should definitely buy a minimal amount of ether, just so that you can say, right, I'm a customer now, and then go to that forum and say, right, let's make sure that every single person on this list is proving their work. Let them make commitments to GitHub and have that persistent witness and that basic legal framework that David is talking about, and make them justify their roles. Like, if they're going to get paid a percentage of this huge pre-sale, you want to make sure that they're working for it. And this isn't just something where I was at the right place at the right time and I met the founder, and so then I kind of got in and then I smuggled in some of my friends, and this kind of thing, where it all becomes traded for currency. Because being intelligent, as Vitalik is no necessarily any signal that they're necessarily emotionally intelligent, or that they're necessarily any good at making decisions, because there's a certain kind of knowledge that you don't get without direct experience. So that would be my advice.
What I'd love to do is to get a bunch of people that are interested in this sort of area to set up a distributed organization which is first and foremost legal, and secondly to continually debate through hangouts like this, open hangouts, what kind of processes should be coded into its decision making, its arbitration, its democratic structures or otherwise, and to really explore I mean, I've got a particular example in mind, which is in Game World in the charitable space, which I'd like to talk about, which is playful and has real value behind it. But I don't mind exactly what examples are thought through, but aren't thought through just from the crypto point of view. Are thought through in a way in which we can really, for instance, picture and almost dramatize potential takeovers or bugs or problems in the social infrastructure, and then see how we would protect against those kind of attacks or corruptions, if you like. Some of them would be through soft culture, some of them would be through crypto techniques, some of them would be, but we would debate those to broaden out the spectrum, just so that we don't get trapped, as I feel that the Ethereum debate is a bit trapped, between, if you like, crypto geeks and legal geeks. So I think we've got the ability to do this agile legal process that I was talking about before, pick an interesting pilot, and engage all these communities, but kind of broaden it out, not just in theory, in some sort of philosophical debate, which is prone to, you know, spinning round in circles or prone to trolls, because we have to make something. We have to make a legal organization. We have to deal with, maybe not, like, I wouldn't go straight for the sort of huge amounts of money that the Ether sale has raised, because that, I've been involved in projects like that before, and as soon as you immediately get that, the shit hits the fan, because everyone starts to care a lot about their jobs, their securities, their income, and they start to get less imaginative and idealistic about the actual principles that they're building into the organization. So I think, you know, having some sort of experimental legal organization, which isn't just on paper, but which is a little bit idealistic in its outlook, is practical, and that we can code in Ethereum would be great. And I think there are a few projects like that already out there. I'd like to know more about them, and then I'd like to discuss how we would create a real legal structure for these sorts of projects and iterate it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So I think what this calls for is another follow-up show where we go and drill down into the actual technical stuff, and like you say, David, actually practice what we preach and do this on a small scale. Let's not raise any money, and let's not, you know, have this be this big grandiose thing, and take it all in our stride, because I think this is a very promising project. So thank you very much for joining us today. You've really stuck with us. I've seen the statistics down below, and there's like 38 people at one point, 40 people almost. So thanks very much. Now you can follow us on Twitter. We're at WorldCryptoNet. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Mr. Chris Ellis for more updates. Thank you to my guests, Ksenia, Nick, Rob, Theo, and David, and of course Paige Peterson, who was here earlier on. And let us know what you think in the comments below, or go to our subreddit and tell us what issues around this area you want us to address next time. Thanks very much, and I'll see you.